first time in centuries, researchers have uncovered what's believed to be Jesus' tomb inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Scientists were never supposed to examine what lay beneath the traditional tomb of Jesus. The plan was never to dig, never to disturb the ground below the shrine. Any decision involving the tomb had to be unanimous, carefully negotiated, and tightly controlled. But everything changed during what was meant to be a routine structural inspection. While checking the stability of the marble floor surrounding the tomb, engineers uncovered signs of a hidden weakness beneath the surface. Once exposed, the situation left no choice. The team had to look inside. According to our guide, recent restoration work at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre revealed something no one expected. What lay beneath the marble did not align with any official record, accepted explanation, or documented history. The discovery stunned the specialists who saw it first and prompted church authorities to impose an immediate lockdown on the site. For decades, the custodians of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem had avoided any major work beneath the tomb chamber. The area sits within one of the most tightly regulated zones of the basilica. Under a long-standing status quo agreement, any alteration, no matter how small, must be approved by three separate authorities: the Greek Orthodox, the Roman Catholic, and the Armenian Apostolic communities. Because agreement between these groups is rare, the foundations beneath the tomb remain largely untouched. Inspections typically resulted in minor surface repairs and nothing more. That routine ended in 2022. Structural engineers detected subtle but concerning shifts in the marble floor surrounding the edicule, the small shrine that encloses the traditional burial site of Jesus. At first, the changes appeared insignificant, but deeper measurements told a different story. Portions of the floor were slowly sinking. Internal assessments revealed that some sections rested on weakened fill material, compressed under nearly 2,000 years of continuous construction, layered one era atop another. Engineers warned that ignoring the issue could lead to irreversible damage to one of Christianity's holiest sites. The warning forced action. Despite their long history of disagreement, the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, the Roman Catholic Custody, and the Armenian Apostolic Patriarchate reached a reluctant consensus. Scientific access would be allowed, but under strict supervision. Each group appointed representatives to oversee every movement near the tomb. The atmosphere inside the church changed immediately. Technicians worked quietly, fully aware they were entering a space that had been closed to outsiders for generations. When archaeologists arrived, they were told their access would be limited. Only the area beneath the marble pavement near the edicule could be examined. Time was short. Boundaries were firm. Even so, the opportunity was unprecedented. Modern science had never studied the deeper layers beneath this section of the floor. The team proceeded carefully, preparing equipment that would not disturb anything sacred while still allowing meaningful data collection. The first tool approved for use was ground-penetrating radar. As the scanner moved across the marble, it sent signals deep into the layers below. The results were unexpected. The bedrock beneath the floor was not smooth or uniform, as engineers had assumed. Instead, it showed dips, rises, and irregular formations that didn't match a stable foundation. Preliminary readings hinted at cavities, voids that appeared to have remained untouched for centuries. No one rushed to conclusions, but it was clear that hidden features existed beneath the visible surface. Microarchaeology specialists prepared sampling tools in case further investigation was approved. Their permission was limited to examining loose sediment and dust once the marble was lifted. Even that small allowance offered valuable insight. Pollen traces, soil composition, and mineral deposits could all help reconstruct the site's earliest history. When the first marble slab was finally removed, the team expected to find familiar materials: modern mortar, construction debris, or evidence of past repairs. After centuries of restoration, that would have been entirely normal. Instead, everyone froze. Beneath the marble was compacted soil far older than anyone anticipated. Dense, layered, undisturbed by modern tools. This was not leftover material from previous renovations. It was an ancient surface sealed away beneath generations of rebuilding. The researchers immediately understood what they were seeing. They hadn't opened a repair layer. They had opened a direct passage into the earliest history of the site, a hidden chapter of Jerusalem's stratigraphy preserved beneath one of the most sacred places on Earth. The team began removing the exposed layers slowly and methodically. They expected to find ordinary fill left behind from centuries of repairs. Instead, what emerged was a remarkably clear and orderly sequence of history, preserved layer by layer beneath the floor. The uppermost layer was immediately recognizable. Just beneath the modern marble paving lay a 20th century leveling mortar, applied during earlier restoration efforts. It was a practical solution, but it also revealed how frequently the site had required structural attention in modern times. Below that, fragments of Byzantine paving began to appear. These stones dated back to the 4th century, part of the reconstruction ordered under Emperor Constantine. Their presence confirmed that a formal Christian sanctuary had stood here long before medieval builders reshaped the church. The next layer carried a much heavier historical weight. Archaeologists reached a dense mass of compacted rubble linked to a 2nd century Roman construction phase. Reports connected this debris to Emperor Hadrian's efforts to erase earlier traditions by imposing a pagan temple at the site. The material was uniform and tightly packed, suggesting earlier structures had been deliberately leveled before new construction began. For many on the team, this matched what historical sources had long described. Then came the first real surprise. Beneath the Roman destruction layer, the material changed completely. Instead of construction debris, the team encountered unmistakable quarry remains. Fine limestone dust, stone chips, and tightly packed sediment. Everything pointed to active stone extraction during the 1st century. Pottery fragments recovered from this layer matched forms commonly dated to before 70 CE. Early analysis suggested the area had once functioned as a working limestone quarry rather than an open or ceremonial space. Ground-penetrating radar reinforced this conclusion. Subsurface scans revealed sloping patterns consistent with quarry cuts documented elsewhere in Jerusalem. Geophysical specialists noted that the shape of the deposits reflected intentional stone removal, not natural erosion. For the first time, the ground beneath the church began to resemble an industrial zone from ancient Jerusalem, raising new questions about how massive stone blocks were extracted and transported to the surface using only human labor, without machinery or motors. Soil chemistry confirmed the sequence. Each historical layer carried distinct mineral and organic signatures that had not mixed over time. This indicated long periods of stability, allowing the layers to remain intact for centuries. One final detail added further significance. The boundaries revealed by radar scans aligned with reconstructions of Jerusalem's 1st century city limits. Some researchers believe this supports the long-debated claim that the burial area originally lay outside the city walls. While still contested, the idea shifted the direction of the investigation. With the major historical layers identified, archaeologists turned their attention to the soil beneath the Roman destruction debris. What they found there was unexpected and far more alive than stone. Instead of quarry dust or broken rock, they uncovered pockets of dark, nutrient-rich soil. Its color and texture were completely different from the rocky layers above. This type of soil does not form naturally in a quarry. It appears only when people deliberately bring in garden earth to support plant life. Pollen analysis provided the first major clue. Laboratory results identified preserved grains from olive and grape plants. These were not wild species. They were the same cultivated plants commonly grown in small household gardens in 1st century Jerusalem. Several researchers noted the importance of this finding. Gospel accounts specifically mention that the tomb was located within a garden. The presence of cultivated plant pollen suggested this area had not been abandoned at the time. It had been actively maintained by someone living nearby. A second clue emerged as the soil was carefully removed and the bedrock below came into view. Cut directly into the stone were shallow planting beds arranged in a simple, organized pattern. They were too regular to be natural formations. Preliminary notes indicated that these beds closely matched small garden plots found near 1st century Jewish tombs, where families tended plants during burial visits. This pattern suggested ongoing, personal care rather than public or agricultural use. The garden appeared to be part of a burial complex, not an open field. Together, these findings changed the entire focus of the excavation. The soil confirmed that the area above had been a maintained garden during the 1st century. The carved planting beds showed deliberate planning and repeated human activity. That led to an unavoidable question. As excavation continued, the trench widened and revealed a second bench alongside the first. Soon after, a third emerged. All three showed the same rhythm of chisel marks, controlled, deliberate arcs characteristic of trained stonecutters, not unskilled labor. The benches were arranged with clear intention, reflecting planning rather than improvisation. Field notes indicated that their uniformity pointed to a family tomb designed for multiple burials, rather than a single individual. Another detail came into view when debris was cleared along the eastern side of the chamber. Beneath the rubble lay a narrow vertical opening. At first it appeared insignificant, but once loose stone was removed, its purpose became unmistakable. It was a coque, a long, narrow burial niche cut deep into the bedrock. After preparation on the bench, bodies were placed into these niches for final interment. The presence of both burial benches and a coque confirmed that the team was standing inside a complete and intentional burial system, not a partial structure or an accidental quarry cut. The craftsmanship offered further confirmation. Tool marks on the benches and within the coque matched carving techniques known from the 1st century. The chisel strikes showed consistent pressure and angle throughout. Conservators examined every surface for signs of medieval alteration or later intrusion, but none were found. The stone remained original, untouched by later reworking. One feature, however, stood apart. On the western wall, a burial niche had been started but never completed. The carving stopped abruptly midway through the cut. Some researchers suggested this could indicate an unexpected interruption, perhaps a sudden event, or a burial carried out under time pressure. While the explanation remains speculative, the unfinished niche reinforced the impression of activity that had not followed a normal, unhurried process. By the time the chamber was fully exposed, the conclusion was unavoidable. The garden above had not been symbolic or decorative. It had been part of a functioning 1st century burial complex. The layout aligned closely with the earliest written accounts, suggesting the excavation was approaching its most critical layer. Then came a discovery that changed the tone of the entire investigation: the linen traces that should not exist. Once the benches and burial niche were fully documented, attention turned to the chamber floor and the narrow crevices cut into the stone. Because the tomb had been sealed beneath later construction for centuries, the survival of any biological material seemed highly unlikely. Even so, technicians prepared their sampling tools with extreme care. The first anomaly appeared when a micro-extraction tube was used to vacuum a narrow groove between two benches. At the base of the groove, pressed against the stone, was a small cluster of fibers. They were faint, almost invisible, but their texture did not match mineral dust. When the fibers were transferred into a sealed vial, one specialist paused. The material did not crumble like plant matter or disperse like environmental debris. Instead, it clung to the tool in a way that suggested a woven origin. In the laboratory, the fibers were examined under magnification. The images revealed a clear weave pattern, far too fine in order to be produced by natural processes. According to the initial technical report, the fibers displayed the twisted structure characteristic of ancient linen. The finding immediately sparked debate. Linen is extremely fragile and degrades rapidly in open environments. Discovering it preserved in any form inside a chamber this old was unexpected. The team carefully ruled out contamination. Equipment was retested and found clean. Additional samples were taken from the edges of the benches. In 2 separate locations, more fibers were recovered. They matched the original samples in size, structure, and weave. Analysts noted that the consistency made accidental intrusion unlikely. At some point, a textile had rested directly on the stone surface. If the material was burial linen, then these benches had not only been carved for preparation, they had been used. One sample carried an even stronger clue. Embedded within a fiber fragment was a microscopic residue indicating contact with oils, not modern substances, but compounds consistent with ancient aromatic preparations. The signature resembled the chemical breakdown patterns matched those associated with ancient burial ointments. Several researchers urged caution, stressing that the findings were still preliminary and required further verification. Even so, laboratory notes pointed out that linen treated with aromatic substances was a well-documented part of 1st century Jewish burial customs. The implication was difficult to dismiss. The discovery carried unexpected emotional weight. The burial benches had already confirmed the tomb's authenticity. The coke demonstrated that the stain. As the camera moved toward the center, a flat limestone bench came into view. It bore simple carved lines associated with first-century burial preparation. These were not later Christian symbols. They matched the earliest phase of Jewish burial tradition. The edges of the bench were sharp, not worn, suggesting it had been used briefly before the chamber was sealed. Through the narrow opening, technicians extracted microscopic samples from the bench using vacuum tubing. Laboratory analysis later confirmed fibers consistent with ancient linen. They matched the type found in the upper tomb benches, but here they were concentrated in a single location. Several specialists concluded that this pattern strongly suggested a body wrapped in linen had once rested on the stone. The assessment was cautious but serious. A small carved niche in the wall added another layer of meaning. Its shape matched short-term preparation spaces used in first-century burial rituals. The niche was empty, but a faint discoloration indicated that an object, possibly a vessel, had once been placed there before the chamber was sealed. Mineral buildup on the walls provided the final piece of evidence. Geochemical readings showed that the crust had formed in a closed environment. There were no signs of cracking, movement, or later entry. If the analysis was correct, the chamber had been sealed shortly after the 1st century and had never been opened again. The implications divided the team. Some researchers argued that the chamber closely matched early descriptions of the original burial place of Jesus before later construction reshaped the site. Others insisted the evidence was insufficient for such a direct identification. According to internal accounts, debates grew intense. A number of scholars pointed out that a 1st century chamber showing signs of a body placed briefly and then removed aligned with the timeline recorded in the Gospels. Critics countered that such conclusions were premature and carried enormous historical and religious consequences. Once word of the chamber spread beyond the immediate team, the quiet of the excavation disappeared. Scientific committees, religious authorities, and international institutions demanded access. Arguments erupted over ownership, interpretation, and control. The conflicts surrounding the discovery had begun. The shockwave through archaeology. When news of the sealed chamber reached academic circles, the response was swift and divided. Senior archaeologists urged restraint. They acknowledged the extraordinary nature of the evidence, but warned that more verification was essential before linking the chamber to any specific historical figure. Some argued that the space could represent an elite 1st century burial without confirming a connection to gospel accounts. Their caution, however, only intensified public fascination. Religious custodians responded with a different concern. They feared unrestricted access would lead to sensationalism or misinterpretation. Several insisted that only authorized specialists be allowed entry and called for strict oversight. They emphasized the sacred nature of the site and warned that careless presentation could confuse believers. This stance created friction with scientific teams pushing for open study. Historians specializing in early Christianity took a firmer position. Many argued that the discoveries supported traditions long dismissed by modern skepticism. According to several scholars, the physical evidence aligned closely with descriptions preserved in the earliest sources. They claimed the findings restored credibility to accounts that had often been treated as symbolic rather than historical. Their statement spread quickly and intensified the debate. Material scientists added another dimension. They pointed to the mineral composition of the chamber's ceiling. Laboratory reports showed formation patterns consistent with 1st century conditions. No signs of later disturbance were detected, strengthening the argument that the chamber had remained sealed since antiquity. Together, these findings reinforced one conclusion: the chamber was genuinely ancient, and its discovery had permanently changed the conversation. If you enjoyed watching this video, click the cards on the screen now.